So what a great way to kick us off for the day. It's going to be a fabulous day. Let's get out of silos. I will say, as a public health speaker, public health nutritionist for all these years, I've been trying to get people to eat more plants for 30 years and made this much of a dent. And so the reason I do the things that I do, I need to get out of my silos. I need to think of all the possible solutions. There isn't one, but thank you for creating another. Very, very exciting. Okay, so that's kicking us off for a great set of talks. And I think are we ready with the next slide deck there? There we go. Okay, so thanks to this idea of breaking silos, we've actually been handing out money, and we have a whole set of speakers here. So we're going to now do the Seed Grant Showcase. This is our great panel of discussants. Now we have given them a horrific task, like a whole crap ton of you should talk in 50 minutes and then get off the stage. So it's not as much of a presentation, a full-on presentation, as just a showcase. These are people that we found, many of them we had never met before, didn't know they were on campus. It's this whole idea, again, of breaking down silos and finding out who's just a couple of buildings away that's working on something similar that might be your next partner. That's really what this whole day is about. Did you see all those networking breaks? You're supposed to mingle, have little icebreakers on your name tag. I think we're going to start here with a 5-minute video from an amazing student, Ellie Fager, who unfortunately couldn't be here in person at the last minute. So please feel free to kick off the next presentation.
Hi, my name is Ellie Fager, and along with Hannah, Chloe, and Gianna, I was one of the organizers and TAs for the Rethinking Meat class last year. I'm sorry I couldn't join you all in person today, but I'm really excited to be able to share what the generous funding and support from the folks at PBDI enabled us to do last year with Rethinking Meat. Back in spring 2021, student leaders from the Stanford Alternative Protein Project, Stanford AltPro, organized and ran a 1-unit course called Rethinking Meat, an introduction to alternative proteins via Zoom, because of course everything in 2021 was via Zoom. With the growing alternative protein industry, we were seeing widespread student interest in these topics. However, there was really a gap in course offerings, both in alternative proteins and just more generally in food sustainability related to meat reduction and plant-based diets at Stanford. So with the great help of David LaBelle, we launched Rethinking Meat. The first year, a total of 90 students enrolled, with an additional 30 students auditing the class. So then, come 2022, last spring, we wanted to launch the class again, this time in person, with everyone back on campus. So we applied for support from PBDI to help us. And in spring 2022, the class was a huge success. We had over 300 students enroll in the class, both undergrads and grad students, with over half of them opting to take the class for 2 units, which included completing an intensive final project. Over the 10-week quarter, the class invited 11 speakers from research, industry, and academia to talk about the various aspects of alternative proteins, from the science of plant-based, fermented, and cultivated meat, to the impacts of a plant-based diet on health and the environment, even featuring PBDI's very own Professor Christopher Gardner, who I think my video icon might be covering up, so I'm sorry, Christopher. But thanks to the funding from PBDI, we were able to elevate the course well beyond the experience of what was previously possible on Zoom. Rethinking Meat became a hybrid class, where we invited speakers from across the Bay Area to come and speak in person on Stanford's campus. And with the support of PBDI, we were able to fund for TAs who could support students through their reflections for each week, as well as through their exciting final projects at the end of the quarter. And also, what was personally most exciting to me was that we were able to fund students to get to try out different alternative protein food samples, as seen as some of the pictures on the screen. We were able to bring in different milks and cookies, cheeses, jackfruit dumplings, pizzas, ice creams, Chinese takeout, and pretty much anything else you can think of. Really fun little food buffets for students to try out different plant-based products with different alternative protein options. To highlight all that students learned over the quarter, I wanted to share a bit more about some of their final projects. So over half of the students in Rethinking Meat ended up working on one of these intensive final projects throughout the quarter, either alone or with groups. We were really impressed by how creative students were as they took deep dives into different topics. We saw as they shared their knowledge and excitement with friends and families, with projects ranging from transforming cultural dishes such as ceviche to Midwestern food, all the way to making podcasts to writing really interesting essays. So for example, one of my favorites was Megan's. Megan created a fun and accessible Midwesterner's Guide to Alternative Proteins that introduces what alternative proteins are, then dispels common misconceptions that people might have about them. And finally provides inspiration for delicious, traditional, alt-protein versions of Midwestern recipes. Additionally, I wanted to highlight Elena, who made an incredible hand-animated video called Science Explained that helps break down the science and impacts of cultivated meat. But there are so many other incredible student projects I wish I could share with you all. In addition to students' final projects, I also wanted to highlight a bit more on the student surveys we conducted. We asked students to fill out a survey both at the start and end of the course, asking about their interest in studying, consuming, or developing alternative protein products such as plant-based meats, cheeses, and dairy products. And the feedback we got was very positive and encouraging. For instance, 73% of the students in the class, again, remember there were 300 people in this class, so 73% of 300. So they wanted to take more classes at Stanford on alternative proteins or other rethinking meat adjacent topics. Over 50% of the students in the class reported consuming less meat and dairy since they took the class. And also 83% of students in the class expressed at least some interest in pursuing a career in this field, which I thought was just incredible. And so after 2 successful years of running Rethinking Meat and the great student feedback from last year, we decided that we just have to run Rethinking Meat 3.0, coming this spring 2023 in a few days actually. Us TAs like to think that we've learned from the past 2 years for how to create a successful course, and based on student feedback, we're going to be featuring several new speakers, more and better food samples, and also field trips for students taking the class for 2 units this year. And we've already seen over 140 enrolled student access, and of course we have now 5 very excited TAs for Rethinking Meat. And most importantly, I think that with Rethinking Meat over the last 2 years, we've demonstrated that there's really high demand for more classes, professors, and resources to further rethink meat at Stanford. So if you're interested in seeing this in action, come check us out. We'll be starting this Monday afternoon in STLC. Feel free to either reach out to me or just show up and see the whole shebang. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ellie. And now it's going to be Zach Duerry's chance to show our voice, who we helped fund for some of this. Thank you. You are on. Again, bio sketches and headshots are all on the website.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Zachariah Duerry. I'm a fourth-year undergrad here at Stanford studying human biology, and I've been a part of the Our Voice research team for going on 2 years now. I'm accompanied by Professor Avi King in the audience. He's the PI for our lab. And I want to preface this talk by saying that Jasmine Navarez is also, she's done a lot of the work with, our Nutritious Access project. She wasn't able to make it with us today. So just to give a little bit of background about this project, there's a lot of student organizations, as we've mentioned, such as the Stanford Food Recovery, Stanford Alternative Protein. There's a lot of organizations that are advocating for more accessibility to nutritious as well as plant-based food options, not only in the Stanford dining halls, but also in the community, so restaurants. And so where we come in at Our Voice, we have kind of a method where we go into diverse community we go to diverse community members and we address some of the systemic neighborhood factors that influence healthy behavior and eating. And so some of our examples have ranged from, access to nutritious food options, but we also have projects kind of taking on, the accessibility to, walkability for older adults. Also, we have a lot of Safe Routes to School projects going on in the area where we look at what makes it easier or hard to walk or bike to school. So a lot of different projects with our group. And so for this project in particular, our kind of guiding question was what makes it easier or hard to access plant-based foods around the community. And we had 3 overarching aims. First, to engage Stanford community members in assessing the accessibility to these options, so kind of surveying what we currently have. The second aim is to kind of leverage that data and strategize and create solutions to increasing the accessibility. And then finally, to use the Our Voice citizen science method to kind of address health behavior more broadly. And so this is kind of the 4-step Our Voice method. We begin with the Discover step, which is where we use a mobile app called the Discovery Tool, which I'm going to show on the next screen, where residents of different communities take photos of aspects of their environment, both facilitators and barriers, and they write in their comments about what makes it hard to interact with their environment. The second step is the Discuss phase, where the citizen scientists meet with one another and discuss their perspectives, strategize some of the themes and kind of solutions. And then we have the third phase, which is Activate, where you start to work with stakeholders, local decision makers, and start to design actual concrete change. And then finally, that last step is change, kind of longitudinally implementing those interventions. And so this is the Stanford Our Voice Discovery Tool app. And it's kind of a mobile device, pretty simple and intuitive to use in both iOS and Android kind of applications where you download it, you go on walks, you take photos, as I'd mentioned, write in your comments. You can do it both text and also by voice recording. And then you can rank that photo as being maybe a positive feature of the environment, a negative one, or potentially both. And we're going to see a couple of those sample data in this presentation. And I also wanted to mention that it's in 13 different languages, and we've had projects at Our Voice all throughout the globe. I recently, this past summer, got back from Bogota, Colombia, where I worked with unpaid caregivers in assessing kind of what makes it easier or hard to access a women's community center. So this app has been used with a lot of different audience members from very different demographics. And so I won't belabor this slide too much, but I just wanted to talk about kind of the recruitment strategies for this project. We shared this flyer to many different community or student organizations, also a lot of dormitories, including the Stanford Otero Public Service and Civic Engagement House, also Stanford Food Recovery. And so once we shared this flyer and students registered, they were emailed a registration link where they were able to access a pre-survey. And some of those questions range from, which dining halls do you access the most on campus? Where's your dormitory located? What would you like to see in the dining halls? And then so after they registered, they were also given a link to register for a Canvas course. So I'd mentioned that the second step of that Our Voice progress is that discuss stage. So for this project, they did this asynchronously. And so this is kind of diving into the data. Here's all the photos that were taken. In the end, we had 9 participants partake in this project, and they collected 30 photos. And as you can see, it's all from west to east campus, a lot of photos. And just to show some of those, on the left-hand side, we see a positive feature. It's a little green smiley face. The student says that they took this photo because there's a lot of convenient and accessible produce offered here. It was the Munger Market, and it's also a very encouraging presentation. On the right side, we see a sign at the Stanford Farm, where this is a more negative aspect. They say that barriers make it hard to access the food. So some students don't know about various opportunities. Another two photos on the left side, we see this photo was taken at Coupa Cafe. The student says that a lot of restaurants in the area have really healthy salad options, but even though there's a lot of variety, they do tend to be a little bit pricey, and this can pose a barrier for a lot of students. And then on the right side, we actually have a snapshot of kind of the common salad bar option at a lot of the 7 dining halls on campus, and the student says that it's stocked with veggies, but it could be a little bit repetitive. So as we can see, there's a lot of positives and negatives in terms of the facilitators and barriers to access to plant-based foods at Stanford. And so this is kind of the Stanford, the Canvas discussion course that we had mentioned. When we asked students what are some of the barriers that they noticed after capturing all those photos, this student talked about how limited dining hall hours make it difficult to access these options. And we have some on-campus restaurants such as the Axe and Palm, but they don't really have healthy, nutritious options. As far as the facilitators, lots of the students talked about the salad bar option as we saw, but also there's a good vegetarian soup option that kind of changes by the day, as well as tasty alternative protein options that I didn't kind of show on those slides, but a lot of photos were taken of those. And I guess overall, just to close, some of the strategies and solutions students talked about: advertising cheaper options, maybe having a system where students can kind of pick out which nutritious plant-based options they want in their kind of box, also adding more food options for nearby campus food places, and just to encourage students to use, this one was more broad, to use their bikes to get to and from dining halls. So kind of what we saw through this project is that the students had a lot of different kind of solutions to increasing the accessibility, and we're hoping for the future to increase that recruitment strategy by maybe partnering with courses on campus, such as one by Ellie Fager, and kind of recruiting more students to engage in such solutions such as this project. And so this is the rest of our team, and thank you so much for listening today.
Zach, that was great. Now we have Cynthia and Carly from, get ready for this, surgery. Okay, plant-based diets from surgery.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Carly Arba. This is Cynthia Kimura. We're with the surgical department. Our faculty mentor is Dr. Cindy Kinn in the back. And we'll be presenting two studies from our department. I'll be presenting the first one, which is a mixed method study focusing on multidisciplinary gastrointestinal healthcare professionals as well as surgical patients. Why is this relevant? So I'm very interested in culinary medicine, and people are often taken aback by that, given that I'm also training as a surgeon, but I think there is a direct link here. So surgical disease risk is directly impacted by diet, such as colorectal surgery, for example. As surgeons, we alter the anatomy and physiology of our patients and the way that they interact with food. Nutritional status can impact wound healing as well as surgical complications. It is a huge driver in comorbidities that have been discussed throughout the day so far. And this group is very passionate about using hospitalization and surgery as a teachable moment for long-term lifestyle change. One thing that we have observed is that there is a huge variety and a lack of consensus among surgeons and other healthcare professionals about what we are recommending to our patients in terms of food. And so we studied adult patients on the colorectal surgical oncology and hepatopancreaticobiliary, it's a mouthful, services at Stanford after they had undergone an abdominal operation, as well as the multidisciplinary GI healthcare providers taking care of these patients, and the different team members are listed here. We did a survey of patients, as well as a survey of the healthcare professionals, and then interviews with a subset of healthcare professionals. And I'll just give like a very small window into some of the data from this study. So the first thing is that both patients and healthcare professionals do believe that nutrition impacts their surgical outcomes. So for example, patients, 79% believe that nutrition is affecting surgical outcome to a great extent. Nutritional supplements are something that we use a lot in the perioperative period, so both pre-op and post-op. Some of you may be familiar with some of these different brands. Some of the advantages are they're very easy to prescribe, they're high in protein, but then on the downside, they are very high in preservatives and artificial ingredients. They're often high in sugar. They're not really food, and they come with a lot of plastic packaging as well as a lot of waste that we've observed. And so we surveyed patients and providers on how often they're prescribing these and using these. 81% of the providers we surveyed are routinely prescribing them in the perioperative period, and 74% of the patients we surveyed remembered being given these supplements. Patients have varying experiences with the supplements. Things that they like, they're kind of marketed as being healthy by the team. They're also high in protein, as I mentioned, vitamins, easy to use, but they did not like the taste or the consistency. They're often poorly tolerated, so they come with symptoms like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. They're perceived as too sweet, and they're often served warm. And so we see this as an opportunity in our own department to shift to a more whole food, plant-based diet for our patients while they're in the hospital and while they're recovering. So instead of giving nutritional supplements, could we potentially provide a high-protein smoothie or soup that's plant-based instead? And so we asked patients and providers how they feel about this, and basically 100% of patients said they would either absolutely, that's 84%, or be willing to give it a try, that's another 16%. And of our healthcare professionals, 89% said they would absolutely be willing to recommend that if it were available, and another 8%, so a total of 97%, said they would be willing to give it a try. Again, I mentioned these points before, but these are reasons why we think this could be a good alternative. It's real food, better tasting, contributes to the teachable moment, is accessible, so easy to make as well as budget friendly, so more ethical for patients of various SES. It's customizable in terms of palate preference and culture, potentially more tolerable, and then more environmentally sustainable. And then lastly, I want to mention that one of the things that's come out of this work is that we've developed a multidisciplinary task force. If you're interested in this work, please come join the hospital food session this afternoon between 3 and 4, and we'll share more.
Hi, I'm going to present our second project, introducing a plant-based diet for colorectal surgery patients, a mixed method study. So during the course of their disease, patients with colorectal pathologies are often advised to either reduce or increase their consumption of fiber foods, but without much guidance. And in fact, this study performed with colorectal colorectal cancer survivors show that they're often unsure of what to eat and receive conflicting advice on whether or not to eat fiber. And a high-fiber diet is not only good for overall health, but also for gut health. For example, there is significant evidence that colorectal cancer survivors who eat more fiber have better outcomes, better survival. So it's pretty reasonable to recommend a plant-based diet for patients with colorectal pathologies. And they certainly have several motivators to eat more plants. So our aim with this proposal was to develop a tailored, web-based coaching intervention to help patients incorporate more plant foods in their diet, to assess whether this intervention is effective, and to gain in-depth understanding of barriers and facilitators that, for adopting a plant-based diet. So we developed a mixed method study using both quantitative and qualitative data, and upon enrollment, patients answered to questionnaires about their stage of behavior change, a food frequency questionnaire, and a food choice questionnaire. Then for 6 weeks, they received a series of emails, newsletters with information about how and why to incorporate more plants in their diet, as well as activities to help them initiate this diet change. Those activities were tailored to the stage of behavior change of each patient, and after 6 weeks, we reassessed their stage of behavior change and their diet quality to see if they had any progress. And for the qualitative component of the study, we also invite them for a semi-structured interview to learn more about their experiences, barriers, and facilitators they encounter. So this study is still a work in progress. So far, we have developed a website which gathers curated information about plant-based diets for patients who underwent recent colorectal operations. And we also developed a series of handouts to be delivered along with this newsletter. Those handouts were created according to the main drivers of food choice. So for example, appeal, sensory appeal, familiarity, and convenience. And we also automated the newsletter and activities to be delivered in a tailored manner, so according to the patient's stage of behavior change. We have already run 2 test phases with the research team, and 2 weeks ago, we launched a study with actual patients. And that's all I had for today. Hopefully, I'll be on time.
Okay, do you love that? In the surgical department, plant-based diets, and a chef? Okay, loving this. Okay, now let's talk more physicians with a great group called PLANT. Wait till you see this acronym, it's awesome. So, Tamiko, Anne, Marianne, here we go.
Awesome. All right, let's see if we can do this. Great, thank you so much to the organizers for giving us the opportunity to present our project today called PLANT, which stands for Providers Learning About Nutrition Together. We're very proud of that acronym. I want to introduce my wonderful, amazing co-PIs, Dr. Neha Shah, who could not be here with us today due to getting sick, and Dr. Miriam Makowski, who she's a PhD in nutrition, who works with the Be Well program. And I'm just very, again, honored to be in part of this study with my very talented co-PIs. I'm a rheumatologist by background and very much interested in the role that food plays in a lot of our inflammatory diseases, and I'm very interested in the intersection of climate and health and the impact the food system has. So to provide a little bit of background for this project, I think we're aware that more than 70% of chronic diseases can be prevented or even reversed with a whole food plant-based diet. I feel like every day we're learning about more diseases that are diet-driven, such as Alzheimer's. There's so many different cancers. There's a lot going on from a health perspective. In addition, no need to preach to the choir here. I think Ethan made a wonderful point about the fact that whole food plant-based diets are simply more sustainable. And I want to highlight some elegant work done by my colleague, Dr. Makowski. She showed that physicians adhering to diets that are rich in plant-based foods and low in saturated fat and added sugars actually have less sleep-related impairment. And I think we're all very well aware there's a preponderance of data suggesting whole food plant-based diets are much healthier. Unfortunately, as Ethan also pointed out, we are far behind in our nutrition education. This is still not emphasized in medical schools. On average, physicians receive fewer than 20 hours of nutrition education during the entire course of their medical school. In fact, only 14% of residents actually feel comfortable discussing nutrition with their patients, which is really a problem. And studies have shown that healthcare professionals, where our own habits strongly influence our patients' decisions. And there's many studies that show that healthcare professionals are some of the most trusted sources of information for our patients. I recently learned about a survey that showed that even the most conservative of Republicans actually trusted their physicians more than they trusted Fox News, which I just want to say that again, more than Fox News. This was a survey looking at climate change. So I think, again, we have an amazing ability to influence people of all sectors. So I think our goal is using healthcare professionals as potentially powerful messengers and agents of change in promoting whole food plant-based diets. So with that background, I want to just jump into our hypothesis, which is that we believe that healthcare professionals exposed to a flexible, multimodal educational intervention on whole food plant-based diets, targeting these three primary learning styles, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, will be more likely to adopt a whole food plant-based diet than those who do not, and will feel more confident in recommending this to their patients. Our first aim is to assess the impact of a multimodal 6-week educational program, change in healthcare professionals' diet type and quality, change in mindset about whole food plant-based diets, and stage of change regarding using the trans-theoretical model of behavior change compared to a delayed intervention group that Dr. Mikowski will talk to you about. And our second aim is to assess the impact of this 6-week program on the development of skills and knowledge required to adopt a whole food plant-based diet, as well as their ability to counsel patients on the same. I'm going to let Dr. Mikowski dive into the details of the study now.
So our plan is to at least get about 100 clinicians, and this is where we need the most help from everyone in this room. We're going to randomize our participants into 2 groups. So the first group is going to receive the intervention that's basically educating clinicians how to go about adopting a whole food plant-based diet. So we know that a lot of times, I'm a coach myself as well as a nutrition scientist, where my clients are really struggling is because they don't know. Like, everyone wants to eat well. A lot of people do want to adopt a plant-based diet. They just don't know how to go about it. So a lot of our intervention is going to focus bringing skills into our participants. And the second group is going to not receive the intervention. So this is a parallel arm at this point, and we're going to assess I'm going to talk about the measurements. At baseline, 3 weeks, 6, and 9, as well as 12, and we see the difference between the 2 groups. And we are going to look at diet IDs, which is a really quick way and beautiful way of assessing someone's diet. So this is more objective. It's going to show people pictures, and they're going to tap on it, and it will kind of find their pattern that they usually follow. We are going to use a validated measure for food frequency questionnaire that has been validated for clinical use. And a lot of our, interventions are such as clinicians can adopt those and use them for their own patients. And we're going to use to see what's a self-reported type of diet that people follow, the readiness to change. So this is basically how important people feel that the plant-based diets are for them, and also how confident are they how are they feeling about changing their diet or adopting a diet? And then again, we're going to measure it throughout the study. We're going to look at the mindsets about whole food plant-based diets. For this one, we're going to use a existing tool from the SPARK. Many of you might be familiar with the work of Dr. Ali Akram on mindsets, and is going to be asking people, for example, at the beginning of the study as well as throughout, what do you think about whole food plant-based diet? Are they easy? Are they tasty? Are they, lonely? Sometimes a lot of people don't want to change their diet because it kind of separates them from the rest of the community. So we are going to look at these and see how we can shift that mindset. And then towards the end, we also want to see, if people's confidence, in a clinician's confidence, changes in their ability and their skills to adopt a whole plant-based diet, and also if they feel confident about advising such to their patients. So the first part, 2 parts of our intervention is about the why. Why should people be following a whole food plant-based diet? And then the rest of the sessions, the 3, 4, 5, and 6 in those weeks, we are going to teach people the how. How are they going to be adopting such a diet, and how can we facilitate that?
Thank you. And the most important part, I think, of this program is not just the educational aspect, which will be about an hour a week, but building a whole food plant-based community. There'll be weekly emails, there'll be, with interest in tips and recipes, discussion group that actually Carly will be moderating. And then we also worked out a deal with Thistle. They're going to be giving discount codes for participants when they complete their surveys. So, and I'm not going to talk about that at this point, but I just want to end by thanking our entire plant team. There's many people on this slide: Carly, Christopher, Jessica Hope, Antonia Chan, Siri Chan Khalsa, and several others who have really been instrumental in helping us to bring this project forward. We want to thank the PBDI for their support of this study, and thank you to all. And we look forward to talking with you more. Appreciate it.
Tomiko and Marianne, that was fantastic. Now we have Young-Woon, who is doing damaged DNA. We never would have found him without this PDI funding. Here you go, get slides. Green back.
Good morning, I'm Young-Woon John, working in Department of Chemistry in Eriko's lab. So today I'll be talking about the DNA in our food. So we have heard about the risk of consuming grilled meat and fried food in general. And indeed, FDA recommends the reduction in the consumption of these food. And the scientific background of the recommendation happened in these small molecule metabolites. So during the cooking process, these small molecules are generated, and upon the consumption, they're activated into reactive species, alkylating DNA, RNA, protein, which should be toxic. But still, National Cancer Institute, they say that the connection between these molecules and cancer is not yet definitive, because to get cancer by eating these molecules, you need to eat 1,000 kilograms of meat a day. So they are generated at trace amount. So we came up with this idea that maybe DNA in your food is a bigger risk, is an actual threat, because they're way more abundant and they're quite vulnerable under the heat. So over the past few years, what we found is that DNA in your food gets damaged significantly during the cooking process. And upon consumption of the damaged DNA, it's digested into the damaged building block. And these damaged building blocks find its way to human DNA. So our body absorbs it and reuses it for the DNA synthesis. So you're going to end up synthesizing damaged DNA in the first place, which is totally genotoxic. And more importantly, the amount of the damaged DNA in the food is at least 3 to 4 magnitudes higher compared to the previously known metabolite. So at some point, I started thinking about that, maybe this our new hypothesis is exactly why the vegetarian diet could lower the risk of cancer significantly. Because if you look at the table, in plants in general, they contain less amount of the DNA compared to meat, a lot lesser. And on the top of that, really interestingly, what we found is that in the case of the potato, they underwent amazingly milder DNA damage during the cooking process compared to beef and pork. So we thought like there's got to be something in the plant. There's got to be something protecting the DNA from the heat. So we wanted to test the generality of this observation. But the challenging task here is that to do this study, we should be able to extract the genomic DNA from all different types of food, and that didn't work for me. I was using a single extraction procedure, and that didn't work with most of the plant-based diet. But thanks to the support from the PBDI seed grants, I was able to screen all different kinds of extraction kits and procedure out there, and finally I was able to extract the genomic DNA from many different types of plant-based food. And now we're investigating the generality of this hypothesis that in the case of plant-based diets, you can protect the DNA itself a little more, so they can be way more safer compared to the meat-based diet. And also we're planning to screen different types of cooking procedure to minimize the DNA damage during the cooking process. So we're gonna end up knowing what to eat and how to cook it safely. And also we are highly interested in investigating the actual risk of consuming DNA in our normal daily diet. So the question here is that, should we avoid the consumption of DNA completely, or still we should eat some of the DNA to provide enough amount of the healthy DNA building block while taking some collateral damage from the damaged DNA. So this is all I have today. And lastly, I'd like to mention that this is probably a good time to start thinking about the quality of the DNA in your diet. Thank you so much.
I hope you all appreciate how rare that was. He finished way ahead of time. Thank you very much. That never happens. So we are now totally back on schedule. Thank you, Yang. Again, a partner we never would have met without this pilot feasibility project. Just very cool, right down the street. Okay, now a pediatric gastroenterologist, Marwa, please come and share your findings for today. Thrilled to have you here. Green button. Yep.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the pbdi initiative. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm honored to present our project. We just got funded, so we're in the process of getting IRB approval. And full disclosure, I was under the impression that I need to do only 2 slides, so it's going to be packed, but I'll do my best to walk you through the study. So background, because I'm a gastroenterologist, I'm also an obesity medicine specialist for children, so I see a lot of children with obesity. And unfortunately, as you all know, obesity rate in children has increased to 22%, with prediction of having 30 to 50% of population having obesity by 2030. So this is a serious pandemic, and it's not going anywhere unless we do something about what we eat. It increases childhood obesity, of course, increases your risk of having an adult with obesity, and also associated with multiple comorbidities. You all know them, but I'll mention a few: diabetes, high blood pressure, fatty liver disease, and the list goes on. Plant-based diet has actually been shown effective in adults. It helps them lose weight, and it helps reverse diabetes. It helps lower blood pressure and cholesterol levels, and it promotes insulin sensitivity. It all starts with insulin sensitivity, by the way. So once we promote insulin sensitivity, we are able to reverse many of the comorbidities of obesity. But this has been done in adults, and I just told you that childhood obesity will turn into adults with obesity. So should we intervene earlier? Plant-based nutrition studies focusing on diverse and often underrepresented pediatric population is basically non-existent. So what we wanted to do here, we want to do a quasi-experimental mixed method design, examine short-term effects, so only 6 months of pre- and post-intervention of plant-based diet on children with obesity. So we have 2 aims. We want to study the serologic changes. So all the patients that we see in the weight management clinic here at Stanford, we get labs because we want to know what I tell my patients, how healthy are you from the inside? So we get labs at initial visit, we get labs at 3 months, and we get labs at 6 months, and every 3 months, 3 to 4 months thereafter. So we want to see the effect of the high-fiber plant-based diet on these patients, standard of care, or standard of care arm, or standard of care arm plus the education of plant-based diet. We want to also assess the feasibility of implementing this diet. Like, we were going to ask them, how hard, how easy is it, you know? So participants will receive plant-based diet education and resources thanks to these funds that we received. We have a registered dietitian in the clinic, but we also will buy them cookbooks that is adopted by the SPRC resources. We have kitchen garden resources. We will get them a gift card. It's called Veggie RX, and it can be used in over 50 farmers markets here in California, because we all know plant-based diet and vegetables, fruits are more expensive than meat, unfortunately. And then we'll see them back at 3 months. We'll give them another gift card, and we'll see them back at 6 months. And at 6 months, the nice thing is that even the control arm will get a gift card for the farmer's market. We didn't want to do it at the beginning because we didn't want to not have like an accurate results. And they're also going to get the cookbook, the family cookbook for plant-based diet, hoping that we will share the knowledge. We will collect everything: demographic data, clinical history, anthropometrics. These are like the weight, BMI, and all the data that are related to their weight. We'll do dietary information. We usually do diet recall. This is what we use as a standard of care in our clinics. Of course, lab markers, which are serological values here. And we will also get, again, thanks to this grant, because this is not standard of care, we will get a stool sample, which they can send a kit, and then they can mail it themselves to be studied for microbiota. We wanted to see the change in microbiota at 6-month mark when patients actually consume high-fat plant-based diet versus the regular diet without counseling. And I think that's it, yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, now I feel bad. Was there originally a 2-slide limit? And Samarwa, sorry if we... That was awesome, and you finished early too. So wait, now I have to stop my clock again. Dang it. We are... Somehow, unfortunately, we are totally on time. In fact, we're a little bit ahead. So Chirag, in the spirit of the gastrointestinal tract, come on and join us, please. Thanks. Green button, all yours.
Perfect. Hi, my name is Chirag. I am an adult gastroenterology and hepatology fellow, and I get to present on behalf of our group the risk of a proposed project studying the risk of de novo IBD among people who consume a plant-based diet. For those that don't know, clearly there are some colorectal surgeons and GI doctors in the room, but inflammatory bowel disease is a chronic inflammatory disorder of the gut that unfortunately has no medical cure. It is characterized by anatomic and physiologic changes in the GI tract, notably depletion of the mucus barrier in the GI tract, increased adherence of microbes to the gut epithelium, disruption of tight junctions, which results in a downstream inflammatory cascade, which results in colitis and enteritis. Environmental factors are thought to play a key role given the increasing burden of IBD over the years, and notably diet, particularly via its impact on the gut microbiome, is thought to play a key role in disease pathogenesis. There's been a global increasing burden of IBD. IBD was first described in the Western world in the mid-1800s, but it was roughly 100 years before it was described outside of the Western world. And the dramatic increase of IBD burden in newly industrialized countries has led to the hypothesis that with the increasing westernization of diet, with the increasing consumption of animal proteins, diets high in saturated fats, as well as diets heavy in processed foods, are leading to this increased burden of IBD. The current goal of therapy in IBD is mucosal healing via broad immunosuppression to reduce intestinal inflammation, taking the intestinal mucosa from what you see on the left, an inflamed colon, to the right, where there's mucosal healing, to reduce the risk of IBD complications as well as reduce the risk of colorectal cancer in these patients. But despite our best therapies, most patients do not achieve long-term durable remission over the decades that they have IBD, which has led to increased interest in developing adjuvant therapeutic strategies beyond our current immunosuppressive regimens, and diet is a key area of interest. We propose a 2-aim study. The first aims to determine the risk of de novo IBD while consuming a plant-based diet, utilizing roughly 400,000 patients from 3 prospective cohorts that are part of the Nurses' Health Study. We're going to stratify these patients by the HPDI, or Healthful Plant-Based Diet Index, which is validated to study the healthfulness of a plant-based diet, and divide these patients into quartiles. This has been validated in studies of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, but has not been applied to gastrointestinal disease. And based off of these quartiles, estimate the hazard for the development of new Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. The second aim is an exploratory aim. Our lab, and I'm broadly interested in quantitative techniques and computational techniques, applying and redeploying a natural language processing tool developed in our lab to understand how dietary patterns, and if they are captured for ambulatory and hospitalized patients with IBD. The goal is to inform the feasibility of future studies, including the incorporation of unstructured clinical data into clinical risk prediction for hospitalizations for IBD, as well as determine the prevalence of IBD patients who are often, I see in clinic, following erroneously a low-fiber diet, even though they may not have a subtype of IBD or active stricturing Crohn's disease that may preclude this. So our goal is to really understand how dietary patterns are captured to see if they can be incorporated into future studies. Thank you.
She got busted on the other side of the room. Bhavika, thank you very much, Shrak. That was great. Bhavika's going to talk about some plant-based meat patties here. This is awesome. How appropriate for the PBDI symposium. All yours. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So my name is Bhavika Mam, and I completed my PhD last year. I'm working in the lab of J. Rajadas in the Advanced Drug Delivery and Regenerative Biomaterials with the Cardiovascular Institute at the Stanford School of Medicine. Before I begin, I'd like to thank my mentors, Dr. J. Rajadas and Dr. Edgar Engelman. I'd like to thank the excellent PBDI team. I'd like to thank Ethan for the excellent keynote address. Thank you. So my talk will be on plant-based materials to enhance the sensory profiles of meat-like patties. We'll talk about we'll talk about cellulose. So cellulose is an insoluble, indigestible fiber that's present in the cell walls of plants, fruits, and vegetables. And while normally we cook to make the whole cellulose soluble, because it breaks down due to hydrolysis, acids, heat, but it's also appreciated that cellulose in its indigestible form to some extent helps a lot with the gut. So it is healthy for the gut. So, and commonly we use gelling agents at homes in our recipes and in the food industry. So gelling agents, as we define them, they are approved food additives providing stability, structural strength, and also they enhance the color as well as the texture of the food. Now, in the food industry, what's typically used, among others, are cellulose and methyl cellulose as commonly used gelling agents. So methyl cellulose is a derivative of cellulose, and it's pretty safe. It's neutral, non-toxic. It is gluten-free, and it is neutral in terms of flavor, odor, and taste. However, there have been surveys that suggest that consumers may be uncomfortable with the idea of using the ingredient label methyl cellulose. And there are also a few other surveys that suggest that further enhancement of sensory profile is desirable when it comes to consuming vegan patties. So what could be the alternatives? So we look at a variety of alternatives that have been known indigenously or across the world. So one of them is tapioca, which is derived from the cassava plant that's popular across Asia, South America, Africa. Then we look at the citrus pectin. Citrus pectin is, you can commonly find it across they're economical, and you can find these peels in your citrus limes, oranges, sweet oranges, and beetroot powder. Beetroot is rich in phenolic acids, and beetroot powders are commonly used as natural food coloring agents. And lastly, moringa. So moringa powder is an excellent plant in terms of medicinal properties. And there have been a few recent studies that show a mixture of moringa and tapioca flour in the ratio of 2:1. It had excellent sensory profile comparable to that of commercial jerky. When it comes to tapioca and beetroot, the mixture of tapioca and beetroot in the ratio of 16:2, it had excellent sensory profile in terms of texture and tenderness. Even better, that was rated even better than garbanzo flour and comparable to that of potato flour. So summing up these benefits, we have these materials like tapioca and citrus pectin as excellent binding agents. They help in improving the sensory profile. They are nutrient rich and medicinal. For example, we have pectin derived from citrus peels. They are rich in galactouronic acid, and they are the quality of extracted pectin from citrus peels, which is not only economical, their quality is comparable to that of commercially made pectin. So, and lastly, they are resource efficient. So what we plan to do is we plan to make these patties in replicates, have a completely statistically safe study. We test the physicochemical properties like pH, color, the cooking loss, the volume loss, the shear force used, the properties. We intend to study the sensory profiles. For example, you look at how the for example, you include participants in this study, an unbiased study with equal number of males, females, all kinds of representatives, and you test what the sensory parameters are like to them. So and these studies are using established protocols for testing these. And then basically this will be a completely statistically sound study using appropriate parametric, non-parametric tests for both physicochemical and sensory profile properties. So the output we hope with this is increased texture as well as flavor of these patties so that we can all enjoy a more sustainable lifestyle. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, you got up, Ethan. That's surprising. Okay. All right, in just a few minutes, we're going to have an open mic, and right after that, there's a break. So if you do want to network and meet somebody, you should think about volunteering to be on the open mic. So you could be over here on the left, and after Matt gives his presentation, move that way. This is Dr. Matt Landry. He's about to become a professor at the University of California, Irvine, but he's been a postdoc with us for the last 3 years. Matt.
Excellent. Thanks, Christopher. And we've heard it several times today already that sometimes our physicians don't get as much nutrition education as we would like, and that impacts their clinical practice. And one group of physicians that's oftentimes forgotten is our obstetrician gynecologists, and they have the most intimate relationship with some of their patients, pregnant persons who care most intensely about what it is that they're eating. And so my project's very simple. It's to do an online study to assess the knowledge, the attitudes, and perceptions about plant foods and plant-based diets among these practitioners. I'm going to use a mailing list from the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists to do this, and hopefully we find some interesting information to develop continuing education targeting these practitioners in particular. Switching gears a little bit, I also get the pleasure, since I am the Plant Based Diet Initiative postdoctoral fellow, to talk about one of our recent studies that we just completed. This was a partnership with the Gardner group, as well as the Sonnenbergs, who you're going to hear about more during the microbiome session. So our research aim was very simple, and it was a very exciting study to look at what are the effects of a healthy and an entirely plant-based vegan and healthy omnivorous diet on cardiometabolic risk factors during an 8-week intervention among pairs of generally healthy identical twins. How cool is that? Again, our study, very short in duration, was only 8 weeks long. Our twins were randomized to either the vegan dietary pattern or the omnivorous dietary pattern. For the first 4 weeks, we provided all the food to them through a meal delivery company called Trifecta, which did, for the vegan dietary pattern, have lots of Beyond Meat products, so whoop whoop. And even our omnivorous dietary pattern, it was a healthy diet, so they weren't just eating the same things. We wanted a strong, rigorous study. After those 4 weeks, the participants were all on their own. They hopefully had a better idea of what they should be having as part of their new dietary patterns, and all the foods were self-provided for them. We took a number of blood samples, we collected poop samples, as well as what they ate during this particular time. We had 22 pairs of twins, so 44 individuals, primarily female primarily non-Hispanic whites. The majority lived in and around the Bay Area, but we did have a couple that lived elsewhere. And they were early middle-aged adults. Drumroll, main adult outcomes here. This is just the clinical outcomes. So our cardiometabolic risk factors. We had a clinically meaningful, significant decrease in LDL cholesterol, that's our bad cholesterol, among our vegans compared to the omnivorous group. Our other significant difference was in weight, although I would say it's very small and probably not all that clinically meaningful there. I'm happy to talk a lot more about the study during the networking session, but wanted to provide at least some initial results for this exciting study that we're currently writing up.